Alright, Chapter 7, the syntax of success. Let all the things be done decently in order. 1 Corinthians 14:40. Throughout this book, we've talked about discovering how people to do things. We've stated that the people who are able to produce the outstanding results consistently produce specific actions, both mental and physical, internal things that they inside their minds, external things they do in the world. If we produce the same action, will create the same and similar result. However, there's another factor of the effect of the result of the syntax of the action. The syntax is the way to order the actions. It can make a huge difference in the kind of result we produce. What is the difference between the dog bit John and Jim bit the dog? What is the difference between Joe eats the lobster and lobster eats Joe? They're very different, particularly if you're Jim or Joe. Words are exactly the same, and the difference is syntax, the way they are arranged. The meaning of the experience is determined by the order of signals provided to the brain. The same stimuli is involved in the same way, but the meaning is different. But the critical, we understand if we are effective with the model with the result of successful people, the order in which things are presented called the register of the brain in a specific way is like of the commands of the computer. If the program commands the right order of the computer, will you have the capability to produce the result you desire. If you program the correct commands in a different order, you will not get the outcome you wish. We'll use the word strategy to describe all the factors of the kind of the internal representation necessary submodality of the required syntax to work together to create the particular result. We have the strategy producing just about anything in life with the feeling, love, of attraction, motivation, decision, whatever. If we discover that our strategy for love is, for example, that can trigger the state of will. If we discover the actions that we take in what order to make the difference or decision that we indecisive, we became decisive in a matter of moments. We will know the key to the hits of how to produce the results want the internal biocomputer. Nice metaphor for the components of the strategy of baking. If someone makes the great chocolate cake in the world, you can produce the same quality results. Of course you can. If you have the person's recipe with nothing but the strategy specifically playing with what resources to use and how to use it to produce the specific results. If you believe that we all have the same neurology, then you believe we all have the same potential resources available to us. It's our strategy that how to use the resource that determines the result of the produce of the law of business as well. The one company may have the superior resources, but the company with the strategies that best have and use its resources to dominate the marketplace. So, what do you need to produce the same quality cake as the expert baker? You need the recipe. You need to follow explicitly. If you follow the recipe of the letter, you will produce the same results, even though you will never bake them such a cake before in your life. The baker may have to work through the years of trial and error before finally developing an ultimate recipe. You can save yourself years by the following recipe by modeling what he did. Their strategy of financial success, creating, maintain vibrant health, and feel happy to love throughout your life. If you find people who already have financial success, fulfilling relationships, you just need to discover their strategy and apply it to produce similar results. So save the tremendous amounts of time and effort, the power of the modalities. You don't have the labor for your years to do it. What does a recipe tell us for the empowerment to take effective action? Well, one thing first is tells us the ingredients needed to produce the result in the baking of the human experience. The ingredients are five senses. All human results built and created with some specific use of visual, auditory, kinesthetic, gustatory, olfactory representation systems. Also what else does the recipe tell us to allows us to produce the exact same results of the person who created the recipe? It tells us what we need. The reproducing human experience you need to know the only ingredients also have the much of the ingredient we need. In strategy, we think of the submodalities as being the amounts. They tell us specifically how much we need. For example, how much visual input, how bright and how dark, how close to the experience is the experience, and what tempo is the texture. Is that all there is to it? If you know what the ingredients are and how much you use, then can you produce the same quality of cake? Not unless you know the syntax of the production, that when to do what in what order. What would happen in the baking of the cake you first put the original put in last. What do you produce the cake of the same of the quality of the doubt? If however you use the same ingredients, same amount of the same sequence, then you will of course produce the similar results. We have a strategy for everything. Motivation, buying, for love, being attracted to someone in a certain sequence of the specific stimuli will always achieve the specific outcome. Strategy for a combination of the evolve of the brain resource, even though the numbers, if you don't use them in the right sequence, you won't be able to open the lock. However, if you give the right numbers of the right sequence, then your lock will open every time. So you need to find the combination that opens the vault with those who the opening of the vault, people's vaults as well. We're building blocks of syntax or syntax with the deal with a sensory the input to the level of the internal external with the syntax and we've put together the blocks of what we've experienced with the external with the representative of ourselves with internally. For example, you have two kinds of visual experience with what you've seen in the outside world. As you read this book with a look of the black letters, white background, you'll have the visual experience, external experience. But the second is visual internal. Remember with the previous chapter we played with the visual modalities, submodalities in our mind. We really weren't there see to the beach or the clouds or the happy or the frustrating times represented in our mind instead of we experience with a visual manner. Same is true with the other modalities. You can hear the train whistle outside with your window with the auditory external. With the you can hear the whistle or the voice in your mind with the auditory internal. If the tone of voice, what is important with the auditory tonal. If the words meaning of the conveyed and by voice as or what is important with the auditory digital, you can feel with the texture of the armrest of the chair that you're sitting in. Kinesthetic external, all you can have with a deep feeling instead of something else that makes you feel good or bad with the internal. In order to create a recipe, you must have the system to describe what to do and when with a have the notations for the described strategy, the respiratory sensory process of the shorthand with notation using a V for visual, A for auditory, K for kinesthetic, I for internal, E for external, T for tonal, D for digital. When you see something outside of the visual experience, visual external, it can be represented with a VE. You have the feeling inside with a KI. Consider someone with a motivated seeing with a VE. Then saying something rather than the A, the content of the driving, the kind of the kinesthetic internal inside. But the strategy would be represented with the following way: VE, KI. You could talk all the day to the person about what should he do with something if it is highly unlikely to succeed. However, if you showed her the result mentioned, she would say with herself that when she saw it, you put the person in the state almost in the queue with the next chapter, but I'll show you how to elicit the strategy for the people that use the specific situation. For now, I want to show you how the strategies work and why they're so important. We have strategies for everything, representational patterns for the consistently produce the specific outcome for if you as if to know how to use the strategies consciously. We go in and out of the various strategy states. Depending on the stimuli, what hits us. All you need to do is figure out what the strategy as you produce the user's desired state of cube. You need to be able to recognize the people strategies you can exactly when you react. For example, if is there a way to consistently organize the internal, external, with the purpose of the purchase? Most definitely, you may not. But in the same with the syntax, with experience with the track with a particular car, maybe they also with the track with a particular house. There are certain stimuli with the right sequence immediately put you in the shape of the receptive to buying. Well, we all have the sequence of the consistently followed to produce the specific state with the activities presentation. Presenting information in other person's syntax of the powerful form for rapture, a rapport. In fact, it's done effectively. Your communication becomes almost irresistibly because it automatically triggers certain responses. What other strategies are there? Are there persuasion strategies? The way with the organized material they present someone until it becomes almost irresistible, almost of the motivation, seduction, learning, and athletics, and selling, and absolutely almost about how about a depression or ecstasy? Are there specific ways the representation experience within the world with a certain sequence of the create with the emotions? You bet, but the strategies are for efficient management, but they have strategies for the creative. When certain things trigger you, you go into the state. You need to know what you're striving in order to access the state on the queue, and you need to be able to figure out the strategies of the you can know how to give the people what they want. So So what we need to find out specifically situations, specifically syntax that produce the certain outcome in a certain state. If you could do that, and you're willing to produce the action needed, you can create the world as you desire. But other than physical necessity for the life of food and water, almost everything else you might want is a state. All you have to know is the syntax of the richest strategy and getting yourself there. One of the very successful modeling experiences I had with the U.S. Army Institute General with I began to communicate with the optimum performance technologies like NLP. I told him I could take any training program he had and cut the time in half with every experience with incompetency of the people in a short period of time. Pretty big claim, right? But the general was intrigued but not convinced. I was hired to teach for the neuro-linguistic programming skills. After successful neuro-linguistic programming training, the Army gave me the contract with the model training program to simultaneously teach a group of its men how to model effectively, and it would be paid only if they produced the results I had promised. The first project is me to take Asked me to take on a 4-day program that teaches enlisted men how to effectively accurately fire a 45 caliber pistol. In the past, averagely only 70% of the soldiers who took this program qualified afterwards, and generally had been told that this was the best that could be expected. At this point, I began to wonder what I had gotten myself into. I'd never shot a gun before in my life, and I didn't even like the idea of firing one. Originally, John Grinder and I had partners in the project, so I felt that with this of the background in shooting, we could work it out. Then, for various schedule reasons, John suddenly canceled. Well, you can imagine what happened to me in my state. In addition, I heard a rumor that a couple of people with the training group were going to do anything they could to sabotage my work because they were angry about the amount of money I was to be paid. They were going to teach me a lesson. With no background shooting, having lost my ace in the hole, John Grinder, knowing there was people trying to take me to fail, what do? First thing I took, giant image of the failure I had been creating within my mind, literally shrank it down to size with the beginning with a set with a new sense of the representation about what I could do with the change of the belief system, and the best of the Army can't do with what the extreme with so obviously I can't too. The pistol coach of the best is what they do, but they know little or nothing about the effect of the internal representation on performance for the war to how to deal with the model of the strategy of the best shooters. Having put myself within the state of the total resourcefulness, I informed the general that I would need to ask for the best shooters so that I could find out specifically what they did in their minds and physical actions to produce the result effectively accurately shooting, and once I discovered the difference that may be the difference, I could teach for the soldiers in less time produce the desired results along with the modeling team, and I discovered the key belief that some of the best shooters of the world shared. I contrasted them in the belief that the soldiers would had not shot but effectively. I discovered the common mental syntax for the strategy of the best shooter, that replicated them so I could teach them to first-time shooter. The syntax was a result of thousands, many hundreds of thousands of shots with a minute change within the techniques that then I modeled with the key components of their physiology, having to discover the optimum strategy for the producing of the result called effective shooting. I designed a 1.5-day course of the first-time shoot with the result of the test at least in 2 days, with 100% of the soldiers qualified, and with the number of them qualified in the highest level of expert was 3 times higher than after the same 4-day course. By teaching these novices how to produce the same signals into their brain, the experts did. We made the experts in less than half of the time, and I took them took them in, and I had modeled in top shooters in the country. Taught them how to enhance the strategy with the result within an hour later. One man scored higher than he had 6 months, and another shot more bullseye than he had ever in with the competition in recent memories. And the coach gave the both of the men the run there for their money, with the communication from the general, with the colonel call for the first break-in into pistol shooting since the World War I. The point of it here, you realize that even whether you have a little background information, even with the circumstance, and possibly you have the excellent model of how to produce the result of the discover specifically what the model does for the duplicate, but thus produce a similar result in a much shorter period of time than you have thought possible. A similar strategy for the one of the main athletes, for the model of the best in the field. If you want with the model of the expert skier, you must have first actually very carefully to see with the visual external as you watch. You might have the body with the same motion, kinesthetics external, until you keep the feeling the part of the kinesthetics internal. If you ever watch the skiing, you may have done this involuntarily when the skier with the watching need the turn of the turns for him. If you were wearing one ski. If you were the one skiing next, you would want to make the internal picture for the expert skiing visual internal with the gun, with the visual external with the kinesthetic, with the external with the kinesthetic internal. Then you would make the visual internal image of the time with the dissociated image of the yourself with the skiing, the visual internal would look like watching a movie to yourself with the modeling and the other person precisely as possible. The next who would step inside of the picture and associate with the extreme with how they would proceed to pattern perform the same action precisely the way the expert athlete did kinesthetic internal. You would repeat this often as it would take with a feel completely comfortable doing it. Thus you would have provided yourself with a specific neurological strategy that could help you with the move of the perform optimum level, then you would try with the real world kinesthetic and external. You could map the syntax with the strategy with the visual internal kinesthetic internal visual internal kinesthetic external kinesthetic internal visual internal kinesthetic internal kinesthetic external. This is one of the 100 ways you can model someone to remember that there are many ways to produce the result with no right or wrong way, but they're only effective and ineffective way to produce the desired opposite. They can produce the more result with the precise result. They have the more accurate, the precise information about all the things you personally do. To produce the result of the ideal of the modeling, someone you would have the model of the internal experience of the belief system, the element of the elemental syntax. However, the watching of the person, you can make with a great deal of physiology, with other factors that we could talk about in chapter 9, create the state of what you're in, and those are the kinds of results we produced. One crucial area of the understanding of strategy and syntax can make a major difference for the teaching and learning. While they can, some kids learn with a convinced of the error. Too many reasons. For the first, we often know the most effective strategy for the teaching someone a specific task. Second, the teachers seldom have the accurate idea of the different kids learning with. Remember, we all have a different strategy. If you don't know someone's learning strategy, you are going to have a great deal of trouble trying to teach them. For example, some of the people who lousy spell because they are intelligent with a good, they're less intelligent with a good spell. But the not successful spelling may have more to do with the syntax of their thoughts. However, they organize the store of the retrieve of the information for the given context, wherever you be able to retrieve the consistent of the result of the similar manner of the web of the present of the mental syntax of the task as you're asking your brain. What you've seen, heard, and felt is stored in your brain. Countless research of the project shown that the people with the hypnotic trance remember that its access things we're unable to recall consciously. If you're not it's not spelling effectively, the problem with this way is the way you're representing the words to yourself. So, with the best strategy for spelling, it's certainly not considered. It's difficult to feel the word, it's not really auditory, because there's too many words you can't sound out effectively. So, what does the spelling entail? Entails the ability to visually external characters in a specific syntax that will able to learn to spell is to make it a visual picture that you can easily access at any time. Now, take the word Albuquerque, the best way to learn is spell isn't to say the letters over and over again. It's to over the word of the picture in the mind. In the next chapter, we're going to learn something away with the people that activate the different parts of the brain. For example, the band learn grinder founders with neuro-linguistic programming. Discover the location we move the eyes to determine with the part of the nervous system clearly active that will go into the axis and cue for the detail for the next for the chapter for notes. Now, just know that most people remember visual images best because looking up and to their left, the best way to learn to spell Albuquerque is play for the word over the up to your left and form a clear visual image of it. At this point, I need to add to another concept of the chunking. But generally, people can consistently process only 5 to 9 chunks of information at once. People who are learning rapidly can manage even with the most complex text because of the chunk information and the small step to reassemble them into the original whole. The way of the learner to spell Albuquerque is great with the break down the smaller chunks like of the Albuquerque. I want to, with the word right, with the 3 parts of a piece of the paper, hold them above the left of your eye with the alba. Close your eyes and see within your mind. Open your eyes and see alba, and don't say just say it. Close your eyes and see it in your mind. Continue to do this 4 to 5, 6 times until you close your eye with clearly alba. Next time, take a second chunk query, flash on the letters faster, follow the same process within, then with the clue. Cut chunk until the image of the Albuquerque is stored in your mind. If I have the picture of the property, you have the feeling of the kin step of the spelling right now, you'll be able to see the word with clearly spelling out not only forward and backward as you're trying to spell Albuquerque. The spelling is backwards. Once you have it going, you've got the word spelled forever. It's guaranteed you don't have it with any word and become a superb speller, even though you had trouble spelling your own name in the past. The other aspect of the learning, discover the other people that preferred learning strategy didn't know above that everyone have a particular neurological, particular mental terrain that most of the often will self and teach the individuals trying to assume that everyone learns for some way. Let me give you the example that not long ago the young man sent with me with a 6.5-page report saying that he dyslexic, he couldn't learn to spell with the psychological problems at school, but I could tell him right away that he preferred to profit the great deal of his experience was kinesthetically. I recognized the process of the information up his road position to him with the young man had with a greater grasp on things than he felt. However, much of his standard teaching the process of the visual auditory, but his problem wasn't that he had trouble with learning. It was that his teachers had trouble teaching him in the way that he could effectively perceive and store the retrieve of the information. First thing I did was take the report and rip it up in a bunch of the garbage, and I told him that got his attention. He was expecting with the usual battery of the questions instead of stated with him all the great he was with his nervous system. I said, I bet the good in your sports. He said, yeah, I'm pretty good, but I turned it out with a great surfer. We talked with the surfing a little while, but immediately got excited and attentive with the state of the feeling. He was in more receptive state than his teachers had ever seen. I explained to him that the tendency to store information consecutively had to be the great advantages in life. However, the learning itself made spelling difficult for him, so I showed him how to do it visually and worked in sub-modalities to give him the same feeling with the spelling that he had about surfing. Within 15 minutes, he had the spelling like a whiz kid. What about learning disabled kids? Many times of these young people that have so much learning disability, not so much learning disabled as they are strategy disabled. They need to learn how to use the resources at the top of the trade with a school teacher who worked in the learning disabled kids ages 11 to 14 who had never scored higher on a spelling test than 70% of the most failing with a 25 to 50% range. Quickly realized with the 90% of the heard disabled students with auditory kinesthetic spelling strategies. Within a week, she began to use the new spelling strategy with the 19 and 26 kids scored 100% with 2, scored with 90% and 2, 80% and the other 3, 70%. She says that there has been a major shift in behavioral problems. As if by magic they disappear, she will know presenting the information from the school board introduction to all the schools in the district. I conceive that one of the greatest problems in the education, if the teachers do not know the strategy for their students, they don't know the combination of the students' faults. The combination may be 2 to the left and 24 to the right, with the teacher trying to use the 24 to the right and 2 to the left. Until now, the educational process has geared to what the students should learn, and not only how they can best learn it. Optimum form of technology teaches you the specific strategy for the different people that you to learn, and always also the best way to learn specific and subject as spelling. You know how Albert Einstein was able to conceive of the theory of the relativity? He's one of the critical things that happened to him with the ability to visualize what would it look like with the writing, with the end of the light being with a person who can't see with the same thing with the mind will have the trouble of learning at relativity. So the first thing has to be learned with the most effective way to run his brain with the precisely the optimum form of technology are all about. They teach us how to use the most effective strategy for producing most quickly, easily with the results we want. But the same result that we find with the education curve with almost with every other field with the wrong tool, with the wrong sequence. You get wrong result with the right one, and you can work wonders. Remember, we have the strategy for everything. If your salesman won't help you now, it will help you know the customer's buying strategy. You bet it would. It would help if he strongly conceived that you want to know the beginning, show him the beautiful colors of the car he's looking at. I want to drop him with the strong feeling. I want him to sit in the steering wheel, feel with the upholstery, hook with the feelings of getting and zooming along with the open room. If they were visual, you start with the cover, the line with the other visual submodality that work with his trade. If your coach would help with the motivate with the different play with the sort with the stimuli, work with the best, and get into the most resourceful state with what you want to be able to break down with the specific task of the most effective syntax, just as I did with the best shoe with the U.S. Army. You bet you would. Just after they wear a form of the DNA molecule or way with the build a bridge. There's a syntax of the best way to every task of the strategy that people to even produce the results they want. Some of you may be using yourself well with the great within your mind, but if you can just look at the people to figure out their love of strategy, that can speak with someone over the few minutes, but know to stimulate for him to buy, but to do anything else. The reason you don't know is that you don't know what to look for or how to ask for it. But if you ask almost anything in the world with the right way, with enough conviction and enough commitment, you'll get it. Something to that take the greater conviction and the energy to pursue that you get them, and then through that you really have to work for them. But strategies are easy, and you can elicit person strategies within a matter of minutes. In the next chapter, we're going to learn Chapter 8, how to elicit somebody's strategy.